let's dive in. We're going into the meat and the potatoes of this presentation of the 3 things that we notice a lot of dyslexic people are really struggling with. So the first one is working memory. And like I said, working memory is one of those ones that if you don't know what it is, if you don't understand what it is, you're just going to make little jokes about the fact that you're useless. If you've ever said the words, my brain is like a sieve, it just forgets things, then actually it's working memory, because I used to make that joke all the time. I'd be like, oh, sorry, hang on, my brain is just such a sieve. And I just used to be so embarrassed about it. But now I totally understand what it is and how to fix it and how to manage it successfully. So what exactly is working memory is the first thing. So basically, it's your brain's post-it note. It's the little place that your brain goes, oh, okay, I have to write that down. Well, let me just quickly jot that down. And it's holding the information. It's just like, it's holding it really tightly. And it's like, okay, what do you want me to do with this? Do you want me to file it away? Do you want me to ask a question? Do you want me to kind of just remember this for a short period of time? How can I help you? It's kind of coming to you and saying, what do you need with this thing that you just learned? So you're using working memory really intensely right now. You're listening to everything I'm saying, and your brain is going, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And maybe you're thinking about asking me a question later, or maybe you're thinking about storing this away and making sure you remember it. But here's the kicker with working memory. It's small. It's really small for everyone. 6 to 8 things is what is considered working memory for like a neurotypical person. And so what that means for neurodiverse people is it's even smaller. And so what we have to focus on doing, and that's big part of this acceptance piece, you have to understand that your brain has a limited capacity on this, and you need to work to clear things out of your working memory. You can't use working memory in the same way, because if you overload it, it's going to let you down. It's going to be that sieve. It's going to be frustrating. So a big part of acceptance is being like, okay, how can I learn things? How can I process things? How can I receive information and not have to rely on working? So that's what we're talking about. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I kind of know what you mean. Here's a few examples that sound kind of obvious. Here's a few more that can help you understand exactly what we're talking about in examples of working memory. And the reason why we go into a lot of detail in examples is one of the most important things with dyslexia is you want to be able to proactively deal with your dyslexia. You want to be able to go into a meeting and be like, okay, it's working memory, and do things in advance, because that's what confident people do. They go, oh, okay, this is working memory. I need to make sure it's recorded. It's working memory. I need to make sure I have a notebook. And they kind of have these things in advance and they feel comfortable with that. So if you ever find that your boss gives you instructions and then immediately you forget it, like a neat example is when you go and ask someone to go to the loo and they say, oh yeah, it's down there, left and on the right. And you're like, I don't remember anything. But same thing when your boss says, oh, can you do that presentation I want you to do on the 27th? And I need you to send it to Lucy and da 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 da. And before you know it, you're like, I'm scared. I don't remember. But what you do in that moment is you're like, okay, this is working memory. I've got to just not rely on this. I've got to clear this out. I'm going to give you the examples on the next slide, don't worry. And then it might feel like you've run a marathon after one meeting because you've just solely relied on working memory. And you're kind of like, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then you're like, oh, power down. Or maybe you struggle to hold on to new information. You find that it just comes in and then it goes straight back out. Or again, if you struggle to make easy choices, again, if you're overloading your working memory, it's like, I don't know. If you're at the end of the day, after like having a kind of a detailed conversation, your boyfriend asks you what you want for dinner, and you're like, I don't know. That's what a sign you've overloaded your working memory. Also, when you struggle to remember people's names, it's like, oh yeah, I'm John, and you're instantly like, yeah, I don't know who you are. You're never going to use your name again. I am so good at not using people's names. I'm like, hey you, hey friend, hey girl, hey chick, hey mate, and just never ever use people's names because of working memory fear. And again, when learning simple tasks feels like learning calculus, it's where you are overloading the working memory. Okay, next slide. So here is some of the strategies that we want to think about when it comes to working memory. And like I said, the number one thing is just about figuring out how to clear your mind. So firstly, you want to make instructions as visual as possible. You want to have a pen and paper ready and trying to remember every kind of, so you're not having to try and remember every piece of detail and you're able to write it down. And this is again where I was talking about that proactive piece. So it's not just a case of like, you're hearing what someone's saying and then you're thinking, okay, I'll go back to my desk and write it down. You go, oh, sorry, 1 second. If you're going to give me some instructions, I just want to be able to write it down. I just want to make sure I've got everything down. And you just quickly pause. You go grab a notebook. You go open an email. You go open something on your phone and you write it down part by part by part because you don't want to overwhelm your working memory. Or maybe you say to them, hey, listen, I know you've given me all those instructions, but there was actually quite a lot to it. Could you send me an email as well? Because it will just make sure that I really get it down and get it sorted and I have everything covered. And again, it's that opportunity to be a little bit more proactive, a little bit more confident. And then also, yeah, so Tony's just got the tag carrying his notebook everywhere, but I think it's such a dyslexic thing. But one of the things that we hope to identify with this is that where you can see actually what the strategy is, you're more likely to use it consistently. Because maybe sometimes you use the notebook, sometimes you don't, sometimes you forget things, sometimes you don't. You don't really know why. And often it's actually working memory. So the next thing is we want to start clearing out your ideas, clearing out your mind, not overwhelming your brain. One of the things that I often recommend to someone is just a little bit of a whiteboard session. Go into a meeting room, brain dump out all of your thoughts, and then you can actually organize them and plan out your thoughts so that your brain isn't having to hold on to all of that information. Because remember, it's just like this. It's like, it's so stressed. It's trying to remember absolutely everything. And then you're trying to ask it to organize your thoughts. So if you kind of break it down first, and then you go back to kind of put it all together, it's going to be a lot easier to organize your thoughts. We also want to make sure that you're giving your brain a break, time to wander, time to process, because unfortunately, one of the things with working memory is, there's like people that are like, oh, you should drink more water, like, oh, you should sleep more, like, you should exercise more, take more breaks. Working memory genuinely is impacted by all of these things. So like stress, tiredness, the number of breaks, water, how much exercise, all these boring things that you never want to hear and you don't actually do, they can have a really big impact. So if you're about to go into a meeting and you really want to make sure your brain is fresh and able to kind of process, your walk around the block go a really long way. Now, one of the things we want to do to try and kind of give you examples and explain things in different ways is try and explain things through stories and examples. So we've got an example of Becca in the hive, and one of the common challenges we have with working memory is in meetings, like I said. And so one of the things that can be really frustrating and really embarrassing about being dyslexic is you've got this idea that pops up into your head. And then, like I said, your brain is kind of like holding on to it, holding on to it, holding on to it. And the problem is you're holding on to this idea. And as a result of that, you're then not able to kind of think about what new information you're processing, think about the next question, think about anything else that's going on. And so just jotting down one word or two words to be able to kind of come back to that idea and not leave it on working memory can allow new information to be processed, can allow you to kind of come back to things. The way that I like to think about it, in case this like visual example gives you kind of any help, is I like to think of it like a waiter. So, you see those waiters that carry like 3 plates on each hand and they're kind of carrying all of these things. That's maybe a neurotypical brain, let's say. We're neurodiverse. So we want to go to the kitchen, grab 2 plates, go back to the table, pop the 2 plates down, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. We only want to carry 2 to 3 plates at once. Otherwise, if you try and carry 6, the chances are you're going to just drop something and kind of have a big impact on the embarrassment and the frustration of having to go back and be like, so sorry, could you just remind me, did you say this or did you say that? And that just like having like one more chip away at your confidence. Okay, next one. So that's working memory. It's holding information in your brain and trying to reduce an effort as much as possible.